Hello and welcome to the H2P Podcast here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I am your host, Gary Morgan. With me, as always, the beat writer for Pitt Athletics over at DK Pittsburgh Sports and other things too. I should probably quit calling you that, Corey. You're just all around jack of all trades, good guy. So, Corey Crisan, everybody, how you doing, brother?
Trying to be at the very least. And a shout out to Alan for tuning in on the live stream. He says H2P. And as a reminder, folks, we're live now every Wednesday from 6 to 6, about 6:30 Eastern Daylight Time here on DK Pittsburgh Sports on YouTube. So if you search DK Pittsburgh Sports Pitt on YouTube, you will find our live shows every Wednesday at 6 p.m. And of course, they're available in podcast format where those are found as well. Quick plug to the website, Gary, DK Pittsburgh Sports. We have now launched our new team feeds. So a little bit new and improved, different little interface, especially when you go on the app. Just kind of is changing the way that we're presenting content. And, you know, these quick little live feeds, it's like having, you know, just your standard news feed, whatever social media app. Think of us as another social media app. You know, that if you want your Pirates or Penguins or Steelers or Pitt or whoever it is news, you could get it right there at one touch, and that's coming straight from us, the reporters. So wanted to give that quick plug. And Gary, let's chat about what we saw on the football field on Saturday. And I think from the title of the show, Predictability, that's kind of my general feeling about what happened in that game against North Carolina.
I mean, predictability as far as the outcome of this contest. I mean, we both
Right.
knew they weren't going to win this one. It went better than I thought it would, though. In the first half, I actually thought Phil Dracovic showed some life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really looked like he had started to find something there. They started to be able to do things that it didn't look like they had in them. So I guess first, before we get to what ultimately happened with Phil, what was that about? Where did that come from?
Well, let me put it to you this way, okay? If I told you Friday that the score was going to be what it was, you would have probably believed me, number one. Number two, you would have probably said, whoa, Pitt scored 24 points. That's something, especially considering what we saw against West Virginia and against Cincinnati. Like, this offense, and we both had our airing of grievances last week.
Yeah.
As Alan says in the YouTube live stream, by the way, we take comments live on YouTube. So Alan chimes in. He says the offense wasn't offensive. No, it wasn't for the large part of the game, and really up until Phil Dracovic got hurt. And for those that were, you know, clamoring for Christian Veilleux, well, you got Christian Veilleux, albeit in a really bad circumstance, considering North Carolina was already up substantially. They have a Heisman contending quarterback. They're just one of the best teams in the ACC, and they certainly played like that. And Mack Brown, North Carolina's coach, after the game said, when we got up 17, we handcuffed our offense. We handicapped our offense. We weren't going to run, you know, page 99 of the playbook. They kept things vanilla. Drake May, who had a pretty darn impressive game, you know, he didn't put up the flashy stats that he usually does, but he still did incredibly well with efficiency. And of course, Pat Narduzzi, after the game, he goes, you know, we held North Carolina under their season average in points, and we did this and that. But then Carolina says, no, we handcuffed the offense. So which do you really believe in all of that?
Right.
But you asked specifically about the quarterback play. And I thought Phil at least looked better than he did against West Virginia.
Did he look capable of 11 15 for 100-plus yards at any point?
Yeah. I think he did at a couple of points. And I think he showed the one big play that stuck out to me. And really, it wasn't even about flashiness or anything. It was about decision-making. He scrambled to his right, and he was nearing the sideline, right? And against West Virginia, that's an interception thrown into triple coverage. Against North Carolina, it was a throw out of bounds. It was the right decision. So at minimum, and you see it with the stat line, and you saw it really in moment in the game, Phil made better decisions. And that was a really good starting point. And you notice, remember what I talked about last week about scheme and about calling quick game and getting Phil going with just a few short plays. That's exactly what Pitt did. Look at that first drive. He was 3 of 3 for 16 yards. And all of those catches were for Konate Mumfield. So Pitt was intent on keeping it short in the opportunities that they were going to let Phil throw. If they meshed that drive, the first drive for North Carolina, with the first drive at West Virginia, they get a touchdown at West Virginia on that first drive when they didn't do it at West Virginia. That's the difference in what that Pitt offense has done from week to week. And it's positive signs as we go into Virginia Tech in a really tough matchup and a really tough road environment.
Well, go ahead and let Alan ask the next question that I was going to ask anyway.
Yeah, Alan goes, is Phil healthy? I mean, that's the big one, right? Phil Dracovic obviously left the game right before halftime. He took that really big shot, went down, pretty significantly, and then didn't play the second half. He gave way to Christian Veillere. Now, Pat Narduzzi was asked after the game, is Phil in concussion protocol? And he was specifically, asked about protocol. And Pat said, no, he's not in the protocol. Then on Monday, again, Pat Narduzzi talking about quarterbacks, he's saying Phil's going to start. As long as everything's healthy, Phil's going to start. Now, I have not received any indication that things have gotten worse since those moments. So we are going to say right now, for the sake of conversation, that Phil Dracovic would be in line to start. However, Pat Narduzzi is preparing Christian Veillere. He is preparing Nate Harnell. They are preparing just in case Phil can't go, or just in case things get really bad again, and maybe the decision comes that Phil has to be pulled. So really, I would think at the harshest right now, it would be a game time call. I think he's going to play. I think he's in line to play. But again, the way Pitt handles their injuries and the way they tend to keep things in-house and the way they keep things, I mean, like I had to see for myself what Matt Gonsalves' injury was. And that's because I happened to be walking, in his line of, his pathway on the UPMC Rudy Sports Complex. And I saw that he had his, left foot wrapped up like a burrito. So like, you don't find any of these things out unless you really see it. And, for Phil, we'll have to almost wait and see until Saturday. But it didn't sound like, again, if he's not in the concussion protocol Saturday, this is according to Pat Narduzzi, then it's assumed that he's going to be better by Monday and he's going to be better the next day as long as he doesn't absorb any hits. So, we'll see come Saturday too.
All right. So all in all, I think that the North Carolina game, as we said at the beginning, didn't really shock anybody. But the defense came to play. I thought they looked like they were at least doing a good job of containing them before they just got beat to hell in the second half. Mm-hmm. There was just no chance to stop them all game. But they held them in check there for a while and kept Pitt at least respectable in this contest, which I think is what we really wanted to see in this one, regardless of the quarterback play. I was happy to see that they had some quarterback play on top of it. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned already we did get a little bit of Christian Veillere. What did you think?
Not as ready as we thought. He just isn't. And granted, he came into that game in a really tough spot. Obviously coming in right off the bench is not the same as preparing to start and going through the week of reps as the starter in practice and doing this, that, and the other as the starter. And really, Pitt kind of got taken out of the game relatively quickly in the third quarter too. So here's the problem I had. And this is a North Carolina thing and not as much of a Pitt thing. This, I think, speaks to how good North Carolina is. It got to the point where Pitt got the football and it was like, when are they giving it back up? When is North Carolina taking the field again? And when North Carolina took the field, it was like, okay, how are they going to score? And is that a problem for Pitt or a praise for North Carolina? I think it's more of a praise for North Carolina, but also this Pitt team does not play North Carolina well. It was the same or similar margin in last year's game down in Chapel Hill. This was not a close competitive game last year. And yes, Pitt had Kalijah Cansey and Haba Baldonado and 4 other NFL guys on the field for that game. So it's not like Pitt plays North Carolina well anyway. Yeah. And by the way, Drake May is just better than anybody else that was on the football field, really, as evidenced by that Patrick Mahomes left-handed throw for the touchdown. Like, when that thing happens, you just put your hands up and say, you know what? Fine, So, let's take our first break, Gary.
Let's take a quick break. We come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the game, answer another question here from the chat. All right, welcome back to the H2P Podcast here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Corey and Gary with you. And before we get to another question here from Alan that I saw in the chat, I do want to say the wide receiver room is not shaking out the way I thought it would, Corey.
Mm-hmm.
Kanata Mumfeld, I thought would do well, but I thought Bub Means was going to be a lot more impactful this year than he has been. For whatever reason, he's just not developing chemistry with any quarterback option they've thrown in there.
Mm-hmm.
Kanata Mumfeld does seem to be gaining some traction now.
I think Mumfield looked as good as he's looked really since he's gotten here. And this wide receiver room was a concern of mine entering the season. It's still a concern of mine. And I know Phil's play or Christian's play, whoever's been under center, has not exactly helped usher along the receivers either, right? There's a relationship there. There's rapport there. There's quarterbacks putting the receivers in position to be in position, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, the quarterback play has not helped this receivers room develop at all. And Phil targeting Bub Means 11 times and them not hooking up on all 11 in that Cincinnati game is a red flag, and it should be taken as such. But to hit Kanate Mumfield like Phil was able to, and to really just get the quick things going, I think this is really the first time, Gary, that we saw these receivers used to their own strengths.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, yes, you could take all the shots you want in the world to Bub Means, but you can't open those shots up unless you go under to Kanate first, or under to Gavin Bartholomew first. Or even with Gavin, you can't go to Gavin deep until you hit Bub underneath or Kanate underneath or whoever it is underneath. So it's not to say that they were running things in a backwards manner with these receivers, but also these receivers weren't exactly given a fair opportunity to make a play for themselves anyway. However, here's the caveat to it. In the few instances where they did get chances to make plays in the Cincinnati game and the West Virginia game, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. And whether that's a rhythm thing, whether that's a talent thing, whether that's a coaching and a scheme thing, you can construe that how you please. I think it's a combination of talent and coaching. And that's not about Tyquan Underwood. That's about Frank Cignetti and about the offense's design and what these reads are going to be for Phil or Christian or whoever it is.
Yeah, it hasn't looked clean all year, the offense, no matter who's running it, no matter what they're actually trying to function with.
Mm-hmm.
Running is not clean. Line play is not clean. Patterns aren't clean. Everything seems to have a little bit of fuzz to it, right?
Yeah.
So, and you see that against poor teams too, where that usually isn't the case. Usually the bad teams, you can barely even tell because backyard football will work most of the time, right?
Correct.
In this one, I'm just not seeing that this season. Even against the early opponents, it did not look crisp.
Right. You want to see rhythm and tempo and execution, right? And that's why I said last week it was important for Phil to get the underneath stuff first. And for Frank Cignetti to draw up the quick game, and for Frank Cignetti to draw up things for Phil Dracovic to just complete a pass, right? Start with the completion of a pass, right? You got to crawl before you walk and walk before you run, right? This Pitt offense is nowhere near being able to run, right? So when you think about just development of this offense, they tried to do, I think, too much too soon. And it's exciting to have, Phil Dracovic reunited with Frank Cignetti and this offense from Boston College being reprised with that Boston College quarterback from a few years ago. But you can't just force anything or everything for that matter right away. This offense needed time to develop and needed to lean on its strength, which was its running game. And guess what? They chose to lean on its strength against North Carolina. And for a while there, it worked. Now, Alan brings up another point, the offensive line. He says, one offensive line will we see Saturday. I'm going to shrug my shoulders. We have seen 4 starting offensive line units in 4 games for Pitt this year, which is not ideal, okay, to be very nice. Not ideal in any sense. And now Matt Gonsalves is confirmed out for the season with the left foot. Jake Cradle, I was told, was hurt midweek. Minor stuff, but that's why he didn't play Saturday. And that was a surprise to us to see him, inactive. And by the way, I think Terrence Moore played pretty well at center all things considered.
Yeah.
This offensive line has what I thought was going to be a strength entering the season, has not performed up to expectation, but now it's dealing with its best player being out in Matt Gonsalves. This is 2 years in a row Pitt has lost their starting left tackle in week 4. By coincidence? But like, Carter Warren was an NFL guy. Matt Gonsalves could have been an NFL guy. You never know, still might be an NFL guy. He's a redshirt senior. So when you lose that anchor to your O-line, this is any team. It's really hard to work past that. Now, they could start that young depth. You could start Ryan Baer at left tackle or move Branson Taylor back to the left side. You have more to play with at center. Obviously, Zabovic's still there as a leader. Branson Taylor's still there. So they have options, but also just the execution, it hasn't been there in a total sense, although I think it was a little bit better against the Tar Heels.
Yeah, I just think you need to simplify the blocking patterns a little bit with the offensive line. I just think it might be too advanced for the personnel right now. And it makes everything look slow and just come together sloppily. So
yeah.
So let's look forward a little bit. We have the Virginia Tech game coming up here. Another night game. I'm sure you're going to have a great time driving home from Virginia Tech, either in the middle of the night or super early the next morning.
It'll be Sunday. It'll be Sunday morning. It'll be Sunday morning. I'm going to stay overnight. I'm not that insane.
But regardless, Virginia Tech's a down squad this year. You know, they're not great. This should be a Pitt win, even as much as we talk about them being down. But if Phil is healthy and, you know, if they've put the appropriate Band-Aids on the offensive line and whatnot, there probably was enough in that North Carolina game to build off of to feel okay going into this one, right?
It's going to be a sold-out, white-out environment at Lane Stadium. This is not an easy venue to go play in or win in. And Pitt's only favored, I think, by 3. This is a closer line than you might have thought entering the season. And now that might have something to do with Pitt playing poorly in 4 weeks to start the season. That might have something to do with the loud Enter Sandman environment that's going to be down in Blacksburg on Saturday. There's so many different factors. But you want something to feel good about, right? Going into a week, regardless of the week. Now, you have to ask yourself, did Pitt give itself anything to feel good about out of the North Carolina game? Which is why, again, the title of the show, Predictability. Look, Pitt didn't get destroyed in that North Carolina game. And there were signs from the offense that showed improvement compared to the first 3 weeks. So there are some things to take from this North Carolina game and apply it for a little positivity going into Virginia Tech. But it's very clear, and you could see this, I could see this, anybody that has watched Pitt football this year can see this. This is not a complete team right now, and it's very far from it. And when you have a team like Virginia Tech that is still on the up and coming, is still trying to figure it out now with the relatively new head coach with that system. Second year, I believe he's in. And then you have a home night game, you know, with the whiteout, and it's such a hard environment. Like, I'm not guaranteeing Pitt wins the game here. I think I can't even call it like a trap game. Like, it's the game before the bye week. I can't even call it that.
I don't think you can guarantee a win the rest of the season. This isn't that kind of team. That's all there is to it.
No.
Yeah. But regardless, it's a game that they should be in, that they should have a chance to win, as opposed to last week where I kind of thought a lot of stars would have to align and a lot of planets would have to come into the same exact placement for things to happen. So let's take another quick break, Corey, and then let's come back and talk a little basketball because we need some uplifting, I think. We have really kind of been talking Pitt loss after Pitt loss. Let's talk some other stuff here. All right. Welcome back to the H2P Podcast here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Corey, it's time to do what we love best, talk some basketball. We're getting pretty close, actually, man.
I can't wait.
You and I had a blast last year covering that. So I can't wait to get into it again. And a lot of interesting things today came up in the Jeff Capel press conference, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought maybe you could touch on some of his comments. Maybe let's talk a little bit about Papa.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah. The thing with Pitt this year is there's a similar feel to this team this preseason compared to last preseason. And it's that all the outsiders think they're going to stink, and everybody inside that building thinks they're going to be really good. They were right last year, right? Picked 14th in the ACC, has a top 5 finish, was in contention for first place until the last game of the season in the conference, and then, of course, lost to Miami. And recaptured the hearts of the city, had this amazing, majestic run to the NCAA tournament, and had, 2 wins in that tournament, and just brought Pitt basketball back. And then this offseason happened. And with Dior Johnson being dismissed from the university, with the heartbeat of the team in Jamarius Burton graduating and moving on, that's one thing enough to come, overcome. And one of the energy guys, Nike Sabandi, being gone, and Greg Elliott and Nelly Cummings, 2 quality character guys leaving this program, right? They already had enough to overcome from a team that just went to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 7 seasons. Now, no Dior Johnson. Papa Conte is out for the year with the knee injury. And now all of a sudden, Pitt has to find a way to turn this NCAA tournament product with nearly all of their major pieces gone from it, sans Blake Hinson, essentially, Federico, and the Twins. There's a lot missing from that team last year. And this is Blake Hinson's team now. This is the Twins team. This is Federico's team. Those 4 guys are going to lift Pitt one way or another to whatever level it is, whether that's top C in the ACC, whether that's 13th in the ACC, or anything in between. And you can't say never because of what just happened. Jeff Capel being the reigning ACC Coach of the Year, that happens for a reason. He has this majestic turnaround. Now he has to follow it up. We said this at the end of last season, Gary. Now it's about the follow-up. And he hasn't had a good offseason to help follow it up with all of the losses, and with Dior being dismissed from the university, and with Conte's injury.
and it says Jeff Capel had spoken to Blake Hinson about the need to step up,
Mm-hmm.
on and off the court, and Blake's responded by showing up about 25 to 30 pounds less.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it in his face too. My goodness, the kid looks slimmer, and I think Blake's going to be kind of expected to literally lead this team in almost every way,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's going to have to be the brick.
Brick by brick, right? That's what they say over there. I am very excited to see Blake Hinson perform this year. I really am. And he has a chance to be just so special for this team, and especially if he came in really good shape this year. He came in pretty good shape last year, but I think he needed to be in better shape this year, and he did. Meanwhile, whatever weight he lost, he apparently gave to the Diaz-Graham twins. Capel said today they both have put on more than 20 pounds. So,
My wife can
Guillermo,
attest to that. She fed them really well.
for those that don't know, Gary's wife is a manager at a popular restaurant in Oakland. So,
Yep.
So it's going to lean on Blake, right? And then from there, it's going to trickle down to those experienced players from last year in that really deep front court. Now, Jorge Diaz-Graham sustained a foot injury over the offseason, and Jeff Capel said he'll be back to basketball stuff pretty soon. So they'll have Jorge, it sounds like, for the start of the season. In a starting 5 sense, I would expect to see something like Jalen Lowe, Ish Leggett, Hinson, Federico, and Guillermo in that aspect. And I think that's a good 5 to lean on to start with. But there's depth concerns here, losing Dior Johnson, losing your starting point guard, however long it has been now, weeks before the preseason starts, is no easy feat to overcome. And losing those guys I talked about earlier from that NCAA tournament run, you have to learn to play without those guys. And it's going to be a challenging season, I think, for Pitt. I don't think they're the 13th best team in the ACC, but I don't think they win the league this year by any stretch. I think they're somewhere in the middle of that this year, just based on the losses and account for damages.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. That said, I didn't know what I was looking at last year as far as how it would come together and gel on the actual court, and I think that's something to at least mention. I think there's more identifiable pieces this year at the very beginning of the year that we kind of have a little bit of a base of having watched firsthand
Mm-hmm.
kind of grow together, so they don't have to start from scratch like they did last year and
Right.
start out real slow and find themselves. They
Mhm.
might actually have an advantage there as far as coming out the gate.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see how they gel. I like the potential for Hinson to really take a step forward, and I thought he was really good last year.
He was, I mean, second team all ACC last year. He was such a spark plug for them. Like, there were so many moments of being around that team, and especially in the tournament run, ACC and NCAA, just being around Blake and seeing his energy and how infectious he is and how he just rubs off of every guy that's around him. They love him there, and he loves being here. And he talked about his decision to come back, and he basically said the decision to go pro did not outweigh the decision to stay home. He wanted to stay back. He wanted to stay back. He wanted to be here. And I think Blake Hinson has the potential to be one of the best players in the ACC. There's a reason why he's preseason all ACC. There's a reason why he was a second teamer last year. I mean, he just has the it factor to him. Like, he could take the ball into the hole. He could shoot the three. We know he loves to shoot the three. Well, I'm going to have a logo 3-pointer counter this year at some point for how many Blake Hinson sinks from the logo. Alan asks, is Pitt going to the big dance this year? Gary, I don't want to burst your bubble or Alan's bubble, but let me put it to you this way, okay? With the factors that Pitt had last year, with all of those really good senior leaders, they still were on the bubble and still got into the play-in. If I don't feel as good about that team, about this team, as I did that team, I don't think this team gets into the big dance. Now, NIT potential. I don't see NCAA tournament this year.
Yeah, again, I have my comment already made. I have to see how they gel. I
Sure.
just don't know.
Sure.
I'm not sure if I can sit here and tell you that I'm seeing the Diaz twin like I did last year, or if I'm gonna see something completely different this year.
Right.
I'm seeing Jorge. You say like Guillermo is gonna start, and I'm like, oh man, you're right. They probably are taking a step back, but I want to see what Guillermo looks like now, and what Jorge looks like now, and what Fetty looks like now. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna wait to form that judgment.
Sure.
But plus, I'm a fan. I have to keep that judgment. Pretend it's going to be a winner every year.
Sure. Alan asks, does Pitt have a scholarship available? To my knowledge, they still do. They haven't filled that quite yet. And then, how long is Jeff Capel signed for? He is signed through the 2026-27 season. He got an extension really before he made that run last year. And Heather Lyke has been very public in backing him and very public in supporting Jeff Capel, and understands that when he got here, he inherited some really rough stuff. I think you can attest to that, Gary. So this athletic department and this administration has put their faith into Jeff Capel, and he repaid them all handsomely last year. So we'll see what again, it's that follow-up that we keep talking about.
Yeah.
How is he going to follow it up? You can have a winning season. Mike Tomlin said it last week when he was talking about the Steelers. 2 is a pattern. Can you form a pattern? Can you make this program a winning program on a consistent basis and prove that last season was not a flash in the pan?
Right. I mean, can they get their mojo back, Corey?
That was a fake comment from Mike Tomlin, according to him. Fake comment from Mike Tomlin.
I'll tell you what we probably need to do, Corey. First of all, it's time to end the show. But second, next week, I think maybe it's time for us to take a little look at the ACC basketball setup, lay of the land, who we think's really the best. Probably Duke, North Carolina, right?
Duke.
Yeah.
One Duke, draw a line, then keep going. That's my early spoiler for you. Alan asks, is there one game I'm looking forward to? It's always at Duke and at Carolina. Always.
Those environments are cathedrals of basketball. And you like going back to Syracuse too, don't lie.
I don't know if I'm going to make that trip this year. The ACC schedule did come out, and the Cuse game interferes with a potential Steelers road game. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to make my way back to good old Central New York this year. I miss that place. I got my football trip robbed, and as soon as that schedule comes out, I go, EJ, you took my football trip away. You took my home trip away. I'm going to miss Central New York this year, but going to the Bronx will be just as fine, I suppose.
Well, good stuff. Hey, moral of the story is the football team at least looks like they're starting to get looking a little bit more glued together.
The wheels are turning.
Yes.
The wheels are turning. We'll see you Saturday in Blacksburg, I suppose.
Sounds good, man. Hey, we'll end the show the way we always do. H2P.